Good evening, good to have you with us in this edition of The Last Word. We've got two very interesting topics lined up for you. Well, the second one will be a hard-hitting debate armed with facts. The first conversation we're going to have tonight is a bit of a discussion and an explainer. Prime Minister Modi, in his Independence Day speech yesterday, made a very big announcement. He said that the government had decided now to bring in the post of a Chief of Defence Staff. A new post that will be above the three services and will help in cooperation and coordination and communication with the government. Now, what does this essentially mean? A lot of people have been saying this was a much awaited, a much delayed, much awaited, much welcome step. That it's extremely crucial for the communication and coordination between our armed forces. So we decided, let's try and understand what exactly will this move mean, what exactly will this post, this role deliver, and why exactly wasn't it done for so many years if it was needed for our forces. So let's say good evening to our experts who are joining us this evening. Air Marshal P.K. Barbora joining us from Delhi. I've also got Vice Admiral Suresh Bangara. We'll have Lieutenant General Raj Kadian joining us in just a bit, and Maruf Raza, Strategic Affairs expert and consulting editor, 2Times Network, also with us. Maruf, if I can just come to you, for a quick understanding. Firstly, why is it that we didn't see this decision be taken for so long? 20 years ago, I remember, there was a report after Kargil that suggested that we do this.
Well, Tanvi, as far as some people's understanding of this goes, this has been in the offing for at least 50 years. I'm told that after the 71 war, it was being considered, and Sam Manekshaw was being considered for the post, but not all the service chiefs were on board, and neither was the defense secretary then. And I'm not sure even now if the bureaucracy will not put roadblocks in the process. Though once the Prime Minister has announced that, it is going to require a fair amount of meticulous handling to put the entire edifice in place. You're right that after the Kargil conflict, the Kargil committee report did recommend this. As far as I know, this was also recommended by a committee that was set up by former Defense Secretary and Cabinet Secretary Naresh Chandra. Plus, there was a group of ministers that also suggested this. I'm told sometime in December last year, the three services came on board under then Naval Chief Admiral Lanba, and therefore the services were willing to go along. Now, really, what does this involve? Firstly, the government of India would do well with one single point of advice. The point at issue is how much of their operational turf are the three service chiefs going to be willing to let go? Because is this going to be a first amongst equals, or is he going to have a role which will not eat into their turfs? Now, there has been a lot of discussion about the turf wars. The second aspect about this is, will he coordinate the theatre commands? And if India is willing to go in for the theatre command model, Mr. Arun Singh had spoken about it. I had written about it 25 years ago. There is a dire requirement for India to have one. We are moving in that direction in Andaman and Nicobars. In principle, the Ministry of Defence under Nirmala Sitharaman, if I remember correctly, had made an announcement that we are prepared for it. But then it's a question of who will pool in what resources, and do we have the resources to address our requirements? Because the Air Force, and Air Marshal Barbora will educate us on that, is short of resources and therefore can't give to each theatre command what it would like to retain for the punch that it needs to deliver.
Right.
All battles require an integration of the three services. So there is a desperate need for integration, and above all else, it is not the appointment of the CDS per se that is going to solve all problems, but there is a much greater need for integration of service officers with the bureaucracy in the Ministry of Defence at every level. Director, Joint Secretary, Additional Secretary, Special Secretary, at the Defence Secretary level, and then to decide the order of protocol, because some people have expressed concern that the defense secretary will become principal defense secretary and therefore be superior to everybody all over again. If that be it, then it will continue to be a case of blind leading blind, because the government's point of contact will be a civilian bureaucrat who has probably, sometimes at least, never served in the Ministry of Defense.
Yes.
So there are a lot of question marks, but once the Prime Minister's directive has come from the ramparts of the Red Fort, this will have to be implemented. How soon? We'll have to see.
Okay, so let me take this point across to Air Marshal Barbora. And how do you think this should be implemented, Air Marshal? Some of the issues that Maruf pointed out, do you foresee that this situation could arise? Can this effectively pave way for greater integration and, coordination between the forces?
I thank Maru for having introduced the subject, and he's brought it out very, very clearly that when the seeds were laid and how much time has passed. Why is it that it's taken so much of time? It's a very complicated issue. It's a very, very complicated issue. I've got a few points to make, which I think should clarify a few issues as to why my personal opinion I'm giving today. Now, this committee was comprised of ministers, etc., and few sprinkling of defense services officers. I really don't know if they really understood the matter in context with India specific. I know there are about 60-70 countries who have CDS. Developed countries like USA, France, UK, etc. But let me talk about USA. US has got a CDS which advises the president. But when it takes place in an out-of-area contingency for which the CDS is a very important criteria, the president gets his inputs from the field directly, field commander directly. In France, the CDS is also to be in charge of all out-of-area contingencies because these countries don't have internal issues like India has, or the neighborly issues like India has. And hence, the training aspect is left to be looked after by the chiefs, that is training and operational training, but out-of-area contingency is looked after the CDS. China has followed the theater commander issue. So there are many, many issues that need to be looked into before the appointment of a CDS takes actually roots. Now, CDS is basically for out-of-area contingency. India's area of interest is what? Starting from the west coast of the Middle East, the southern coast of Middle East, the East African countries, coming down to the Indian Ocean, and then going into Southeast Asia. It is not to show power that we want a CDS or something of that nature. It is for coordination.
Right.
Now, our idea is not to also show power. It is to be able to convince the people who are around us, surrounding us, that we are there to look after them. When they need us, they can call for us and we'll be there. And we have done it n number of times. And there was no CDS then that time. But I can talk of tsunami for that matter. What a beautiful coordination by the three services. So it doesn't mean that the three service chiefs are not performing their task as directed by the government. We are doing it by appointing a CDS. There are certain issues which I'd like to bring to light. Please give me a few minutes here. Now, India's problems, what? We've got so many internal issues. We've got local conflicts on a day-to-day basis happening across the LOC. We have problems in the Northeast. We have the Maoist problem. Do you mean to say the CDS is going to control all this in case he is made the Chief of Defence Staff? His Charter of Duties are not clear today. What is the Charter of Duties? Is he going to be part of the cabinet? In my understanding, no. If he is not going to be part of the cabinet like in other countries it is, what is going to be his role? Today we have a CISC, who's Chief of Integrated Defence Staff, to the Chiefs of Staff Committee. He is looking after procurements, he is looking after recommendations, but his level goes after the three committees. That is, the third committee is with the defense minister, beyond which the defense minister and the defense secretary, who may not have served, like Maruf just brought out, in the defense environment at all, is the advisor to the government of India. After the Mumbai attack, beyond 24 hours, we were not even consulted as to what to do except for the helicopters to drop the commandos there. I don't know. Will the CDS will play the same role as the CISC, like I said, who is the advisor to the Chiefs of Staff Committee, be another hurdle where time will be consumed to clear a certain hurdle, and he'll also go to the defense secretary, who as of today is actually responsible for any war and how we take actions as defense services. Is it right?
Okay.
We have people who are chiefs who are all 40 years plus of service. Is it correct that the defense secretary is the advisor? Or is the defense CDS going to override the defense minister also and go directly to the PM? Is that going to be the charter? I don't know.
No.
So is it going to be another area where there will be further delays in decision making? Now, just to give you an example, if we are in an all-out war or a conflict and the CDS is in charge, what we did in Balakot, if there was any change that was brought about in the last minute, I'm sorry, we couldn't have called back those aircraft because they have been given the task. So decision making has to be such that it's going to be secret before, during, and after. In bringing in more people into this game by creating another hierarchical pyramid there, are we going to achieve faster decision making? Please do consider what I'm trying to say. We have one of the charters is to look after, our so-called nuclear assets, etc., which we can use during any conflict if called upon. I think we have established a very nice nuclear command. Assets are not fully there, but when they come, they'll be used. But can I or can this country afford to give assets to Strategic Force Command, which will be lying idle otherwise and not being used by the Air Force, like I'm saying, some aircraft which can be dropped, which can drop nuclear weapons, or the triads being used? Or is it left up to the person who is in charge of that area?
Okay,
and
so
that is the SFC
Air Marshal
commander.
Barbara, let's take it point by point.
As of now, having served as a vice chief.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and you've brought out a very interesting point.
Yep, okay.
And I want to take it to our other panelists. Maruf, I see your hand, but just allow me a couple of more minutes, and let me go across to Vice Admiral Suresh Bangara and also say good evening to General Kadyan, who's joining us. Vice Admiral Bangara, do you believe that this post will help in better communication with the government, or will this be more about communication and coordination between the three arms, between the three services?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Oh, good. I am saddened by what I heard from the Air Marshal. Let me say that I am not speaking from reading a book or having a discussion in a cold air-conditioned office. I was present right through the discussions. I was then heading the naval operations. From 2000 to 2002, every single point that the Air Marshal has made has been discussed and decisions taken. Now, to go back to 2002, I'm really saddened. It's a no-brainer to say that a CDS is required. It's a no-brainer. Our cultural issues, our unique situations in India, you can talk about anything. Let me make 2 points. No country, that includes USA, integrated because the armed forces agreed. It was a political decision to integrate. The Goldwater-Nichols Act in United States, similarly after Maggie Thatcher came to power in UK, it's a political decision to integrate. So it's nothing to do with the services always guard their turf. So left to armed forces, they wouldn't have integrated. But there is a dire need to have a single contact point. The only issue is what operational role will you assign to the CDS? Will you let the CDS build up this structure and then assign the operational roles? These are issues we'll get to know only after the report comes from the government. At the moment, we're all shooting in the dark, and we're talking about the things that we talked about in 2002. Arun Singh was crystal clear when he recommended things. There were 85 recommendations in the Committee of Defense Management. Out of that, all the recommendations were approved by the group of ministers. It went to the Prime Minister. At the Prime Minister's level, he approved everything, and he said, let us await political consensus for CDS. That political consensus was dropped, the government's changed, and it has taken us 18 years to go back to the point at which all decisions had been taken. So to say that what will CDS do, we are all shooting in the dark. Let us see the papers when it comes.
Okay.
He may not have an operational role. He may have an operational role. Theater commands have to come. They will come. So in my view, this is a great step. It's the first step. Everything is not going to be all singing, all dancing. There will be objections. There will be problems. But I am 100% sure that the CDS will be effective.
So this is great. We've got a power pack panel here who are getting us and giving us all kinds of angles and facts to this story, and this is what usually helps our viewers form an informed opinion about any big policy decision that takes place. Let me take this across to General Kadyan. General Kadyan, good evening. What do you think should be defined as the role and the powers of the CDS? Obviously, we don't know what it will entail, but what should it entail according to you?
The need for a CDS has been a long-standing demand, and as Sanjeev Bangara says, it is a no-brainer. It has come. It was needed. Even without this, we were making ad hoc arrangement. After all, what does the chairman of the Chiefs of Staff Committee do? He stands in for a CDS. It's a temporary post. And also it is rotational. So it keeps changing. When the air chief, who is presently the chairman of that committee, retires next month, then army chief becomes, he will have 3 months tenure. So it was a very ad hoc arrangement. Operationally, of course, our focus is always on operation, but look at the logistics also. At the moment, there's so much of overlapping, so much of duplication, each service trying to maintain a kind of logistic department. All that will be coordinated. There will be tremendous saving in the budget, which is always at a premium. Also, there will be a single point advisor, not only on the operational matters in the procurement policies. At the moment, these decisions are taken by civilians who are non-professional. So there may be considerations which are not really relevant to the professionalism. So this man who is a professional man, who will know all the detail, he goes with the government with a single point recommendation of who should procure what in what particular year. And that advice will be much more professional than what is existing today. His power and his authority is yet to be decided. It will take the ministry a couple of months to come out with a detailed paper. At the moment, we only have a policy decision that has been announced, which is very good for all the three services. But I hope he is not again subservient to the Minister of Defense and the Defense Secretary having the last word. Then perhaps it will not serve the purpose for which it is being created. He should have direct access to the cabinet. That is my view.
Direct access to the
so
cabinet.
That we save in the
It can't be a post that again gets bogged down by bureaucracy. And that's the point that I think everybody on this panel agrees on. I take that point, and let me go back to Maruf. Maruf, you wanted to say something when Air Marshal Barbora was making his points.
Yeah. You see, the Air Marshal comes in with a lot more experience in uniform than I have. But I've studied the subject in great detail and examined it from various angles. And my understanding is the following. Firstly, the CDS, the Chairman of Defense Staff, or what some other countries call by some other nomenclature, Chairman of Joint Staffs and whatever Joint Chiefs of Staff, Pakistan also has one, is not a person of cabinet rank, cannot be. He will be one from the services selected by the government of the day for having the necessary skills and not necessarily just the seniority by date of birth or date of commissioning to be able to fulfill a variety of roles without, as my understanding goes, stepping on the toes of the other chiefs and the three services. So, after the Kargil Review Committee report, the CDS process, as Admiral Bangara has spoken, and I've read with interest one of his articles, that the matter reached a point where even the flag was designed, and when Vajpayee ji, in his own inimical way, set it aside by saying, "Iska ab waqt nahi aaya hai," or words to that effect. So, finally, it has to get political support and approval. The CDS is going to work in very close coordination with the National Security Advisor. He will neither be superior to the National Security Advisor nor the Raksha Mantri. He will be a service officer, most likely of a 4-star rank like the other service chiefs, but having a number of responsibilities, as General Kadian has brought out. He will be able to fine-tune the logistics requirements, which are spread all over the place in India of the three services. He will be able to prune the procurement process, because please remember, if the Navy wants helicopters, so does the Army want helicopters. So we go and keep reinventing the wheel for everybody else. Why can't we share our resources? I know the Air Force has reservations about that, because the Air Force's resources are anyway at the barest minimum right now. So who are they going to allocate what? So those things will have to be worked out. I don't think he will have much operational responsibility, but he will be a coordinator, which is right now being done in many cases by the bureaucracy without understanding often the difference between a fighter aircraft and a transport aircraft, or between, a particular type of a tank and an armored vehicle. And I know that goof-ups have taken place in procurement where a particular variant of an armored vehicle has arrived on Bombay docks because it had the same name of what the services wanted, but it wanted brand 5. We got brand 2. Right. And then the services were told, hush it up, modify, and make use of it. We can't send it back to Russia. So we have to overcome all that. We are not a very rich country. We have limited resources. This will be better put to use. And finally, Air Marshal brought out that our strategic area of interest is from the coast of Africa to the coast of Southeast Asia. Yes. And that is the future role that we are expected to play globally. So there has to be somebody who comes in with an international understanding and explains to the Raksha Mantri and the bureaucrats that where we can position our resources, and they don't need to have hide and seek games with each service trying to get their share of importance and resources and budgetary allocation.
Okay, so let me get a response, Maruf.
As Admiral Bangara said, a lot of homework has taken place. This is in its final stages. It will now be implemented. And I'll tell you one thing. Those bureaucrats and others who've created a fear that having a CDS will be a faster route to having a coup in the country should be ashamed of themselves, because they insult the integrity of the armed forces and their commitment to the idea of India and the Constitution.
I completely agree
never
with you
harbor
there.
those intentions.
Yes.
And a CDS himself can't coordinate it if the service chiefs can't coordinate it, because the army itself is the only organization that can actually do a coup in India, and it is not designed to do a coup and has no intentions. Believe me. So this is nonsense. We should accept the fact that it is for the betterment of our security requirements, and there will be internal security requirements, and the NSA will handle that.
Yes. So that perhaps also help in separation of the the responsibilities and duties of internal and external security between the NSA and the CDS. I'm running out of time, but Air Marshal Barbara, please do go ahead and make your point before we wrap this up.
Yeah. I have never said that we don't require CDS, but the timing of the CDS has to be when India finally comes to understanding that what is their going to be role in the world. I am not saying CDS is not required, but if a CDS is going to look after procurements, do you mean to say he'll be able to increase the budget to the defense services, which is the lowest today at 1.5%, although government announces lakhs and crores of rupees that have been given. But we haven't got, at least the Air Force hasn't got 120 odd aircraft, and we've got 36 aircraft. And who's going to do this so-called logical decision making to say, okay, the government, I can promise you one thing, has always come up and given us emergency money to go ahead and procure. Always. Even if it is required to be taken from one service and given to the other service. But can a CDS really, with all the inputs that we have, go directly to the PM and say, increase my budget? I remember once the PM addressed us and he said that the growth of this country will give me the ability to give you 3% of GDP. The finance minister was the next to speak when the PM left. He said, PM has made this statement, but I can promise you one thing, you will not get more than 2%. That is the financial hold. Unfortunately, this country requires money for many, many projects. We are not going to get more money. And if we are not going to get any money, I am sorry, we cannot improve the overall quality and operational capability of the three services.
Okay.
At this moment, I feel CDS may not be a bright idea. When time comes, yes, do it.
Okay, so everybody has a view about it. It was very interesting to hear different views on this. Maruf, my apologies to you, but I'm completely out of time. I've already gone over on this debate. But thank you so much to all of you for joining us. Well, what remains to be seen is the effectiveness of this new post that is being created. Obviously, we understand that it's taken almost 20 years of intensive conversation and debates and discussions to bring about this big move, this big role that has now been announced. But what will be the extent of the role? What will be the extent of the responsibilities? What will be the extent of access and power which is given to the Chief of Defence Staff still remains to be seen. May not be the solution to all the problems for our forces, but one can only hope it becomes a good starting point for better integration, coordination, resource management, and for overall betterment of our services. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining us on debate number 1. Let's move on to debate number 2.